Would you tell me, please, Mr. Howard, why should I trade one tyrant 3,000 miles away for 3,000 tyrants 1 mile away?
Welcome back to the Backwards History Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Will, here with my co-host, Kevin. Say hi, Kevin.
Hi, Kevin.
Shut up, Kevin.
I just did what you said. Stop sending me mixed messages, dude.
Right. Well, I just want to start this episode off with a parting shot to a 2020 presidential hopeful
Kick them while they're down.
Pun intended, shot himself in the foot.
Repeatedly.
Right. With a semi-automatic weapon of war. Bye-bye, Beto Beta O'Rourke.
Who knew if you get on TV and threaten to take people's rights away, they won't vote for you? Crazy, right?
Well, I mean, not according to the Democratic Party, because every single one of them talk about taking rights away, but the Republicans are no better.
Well, they do have their pros and cons on both sides of the aisle.
Hence the reason I'm a constitutionalist. And we will do an episode later actually defining what a constitutionalist is, but that is not today.
Not today.
Today, we actually felt like it was time to do a part 2 to our state of policing in 2019 America.
Deuce.
Last time we had our guest, Nick Moore from GFS Security on. And if you want to hear that, just hop on back a couple episodes and check it out. But me and Kevin felt that we didn't necessarily get to give the Backwards History Podcast's view on police as much as we'd like to. We didn't want to run our guest over. We want to be polite to our guest and give his point of view.
Absolutely.
A stage. But now it's our turn.
All right.
I think that police, public servants in all levels have forgotten who they work for, have forgotten the oath that they've taken.
Who pays their salary?
Who pays their salary. And God, don't ever say that to one of them, because that lights them on fire worse than anything. But we do.
Sore subject.
But most directly, this is pointed at police as a whole, mainly because out of any level of public officials, they are the main ones that would be in a form of interaction with most civilians, or civilians entirely, to subvert your rights or violate your rights. They're basically the enforcement arm of our government, whether it be state, local, federal, what have you. They are the ones that are literally going to come and do things. Case in point, like Beto O'Rourke was talking about, if you did not do the mandatory buyback, which is by its face, it is a gun confiscation, because if you don't participate in the buyback, then you would be forced to give up your weapons by cops at your door. By force.
And the whole buyback premise of, I'm going to take the money I collected from you to buy your property back from you.
Right. That's wrong. That is entirely ridiculous. The question I have is, who do you call when the police are the ones breaking the law? The police are the ones violating the Constitution.
The ones charged with protecting your rights are the ones violating them.
They literally swear an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution from enemies both foreign and domestic, as well as upholding their state constitution, blah, blah, blah.
Which are based off the United States Constitution.
Right. And we're supposed to have equal protection under the law. Per the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. And per several amendments of the U.S. Constitution, no one is to be deprived of life, liberty, or property.
Right. Without due process.
Without due process of law. And we see on a daily basis And I don't know if it's just because of the relative availability of cameras now that are network connected, that everybody can see live in a lot of cases. I don't know if it's because of that we're seeing more of it or what, but on a daily basis, there are multiple situations where police are, in fact, breaking the law.
Committing criminal acts and acting outside the law in many instances.
Right. They blatantly violate the First Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, the Sixth Amendment.
Several of them.
Exactly.
Habitually.
Under the color of law, which there's actually legal precedent for violation of rights on the color of law and the conspiracy against rights on the color of law. It's 18 U.S.C. sections 241 and 242.
I think you've heard of this one.
And the thing is, they kind of bridge a gap between two different branches of the government. They're the executive branch, but they work with, in a very conflict of interest type of way, with the judicial branch, because the judicial branch gains money by their actions. Whether the person is found guilty or not, the court still paid their court fees.
Oh yeah, there's something.
You know, their fines and everything else levied by the judiciary that is directly resulted from the police making arrests.
It's certainly a money-making venture. On some level, they're going to get your wallet. I mean, it's just, there's no way around it.
And then if a cop does something wrong, you know, me or you, I do something wrong, that's an arrestable offense, I'm arrested on the spot.
We're held accountable.
A cop does something wrong, well, you got to wait. We got to do an internal review. And he can still keep working. He can do whatever, or he might get a paid vacation, blah, blah, blah.
Administrative leave.
Yeah.
Why don't you just take a couple of weeks off, think about what you did. Don't worry about your bills. We'll keep paying you.
How can you be trusted to investigate your own? That would be like McDonald's doing its own health inspection.
Right. I mean, in my line of work with insurance, I have to answer to the Center of Medicare and Medicaid Services. If I break the law, I'm subject to fines, imprisonment in some cases, and having my license revoked. But that's a completely separate department that monitors me and people in my line of work. We're not all buddy-buddy.
Right. And, like, for me and you, ignorance of the law is no excuse. We've heard that in our entire lives. Ignorance of the law is no excuse.
Unless you get a badge.
Right. Because ignorance of the law is 100% an excuse. Police enjoy what is known as qualified immunity, which is where if there is no precedent or clearly established case law that something is legal, then their actions towards it being illegal are completely justified because, they're immune to it because they didn't know.
Yeah, it's one of those things of, I'm sorry, I didn't know.
But I'm not paid to enforce the law. So why should I be punished to the law's full extent if I don't know the law and I break it? Whereas those who are paid to enforce the law aren't even required to know the law that they are enforcing, with sometimes, and probably more often than I personally feel is justified, with deadly force.
Right. It's one of those things, if they make a mistake, it's okay, you didn't know. Right. But if someone like me or you does it, well, you should have known.
You're a hero.
You know.
You're a hero if you wear a badge by default.
Right. Regardless of what kind of person you may or may not be.
Right.
Your personal character doesn't matter.
Right. And everybody would be like, well, I've talked to him. He's a nice guy, blah, blah, blah. You can be a great person and a terrible cop.
And some people, they just can't handle that little bit of authority they get. And it just goes to their head. And they end up jeopardizing people's lives. And in many cases, taking those lives.
Right.
With very little repercussion.
But there's bad apples in every profession, Kevin.
Well.
Yeah, but I think I even said this in the last time we talked about this, was the saying is not bad apples stand alone from the bunch and they can just be picked out and everything's fine.
Right.
Bad apples spoil the bunch.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is, if a bad apple is not corrected, that bad apple can raise in rank.
Mm-hmm.
And then if the chief is bad, then his captains are bad, or potentially.
Right.
His lieutenants are potentially bad. Their sergeants are potentially bad. And then the number of people grows from there, because one chief could have 4 captains, and those 4 captains could have 4 sergeants, and those sergeants could all have 4 people under them. And then you've got a whole bad department.
A trickle-down effect or a domino effect.
And who's holding them accountable if it's an internal affairs investigation that
Right.
finds no wrongdoing? And shoot, we can't even get started on police unions.
Oh, Lord.
We would be here all day talking about police unions, and how they throw their weight around behind bad officers just because they can, because they're also members of the thin blue line, and how those that speak out that are cops are those that, everybody's like, well, there's good officers. Well, the good officers that try and stand up against the bad officers, more often than not, get fired. Or they get death threats from their fellow officers, or other things of that nature.
Have their families threatened.
Exactly. And
Forced into silence.
posing the same question over again is, who do you call when the police are the problem?
Right. The ones who are supposed to protect you are the ones threatening you.
Right.
They're the ones putting you in danger, either willingly or by definition, ignorance of the law they're hired and trained to uphold.
Well, let's look at one instance in Texas. I think it was last year, the Tuttles.
Oh, yeah.
One officer falsified a warrant saying that his confidential informant had bought black tar heroin from this husband and wife. And the police raided the house. Well, the guy shot at him when they came in the door. Well, supposedly, because
supposedly
they never recovered the .357 Magnum that he shot. But
it should be pretty easy to find.
the details of that aren't important.
Right.
The question is, the statement really, if cops were to burst into my door right now, we're just sitting back here recording a podcast. We're not doing anything whatsoever illegal. By the law, we have the right to defend ourselves against police actions that are unlawful with whatever force necessary, which can include
Deadly force.
But if I were to do that right now, they're not going to just, our bad, we'll stop.
Right.
They're going to keep sending bodies until I'm dead.
Let's slow down and reassess the situation.
No, there's none of that. There's rush, escalate. Even if one bad cop was the reason that they came in, they're never going to question him.
No.
They're going to back him 110%, and they'll keep pouring their bodies through the door to get the bad guy.
The bad guy.
So where does that leave us as the American citizen? There have been, just this month, there have been several people who were sitting in their homes doing nothing wrong in Texas again. Texas is having some issues. Well, at least we got a conviction for Amber Geiger, who shot the man in his own apartment thinking it was hers, even though they tried to say, he threatened her, so she was justified. That was the police's argument. No, the man was in his own home.
In his house.
He had the right to kill her, not the other way around.
Right.
Because she walked into his home and drew a gun, whether she made a huge mistake or not. oh well, you know.
Right.
Granted, voluntary manslaughter I feel would have been more appropriate than murder because murder has an implication of
Premeditation.
right premeditation, like she intended on killing him. I don't feel that the
There was an intent there.
right.
Right.
If in fact it was accidental, she went to the wrong apartment because she was too busy sexting one of her coworkers. Let's be honest.
Oh boy.
Right. But there's been two other instances. One lady was in her home playing video games with her nephew, and a cop walked into her backyard. Apparently saw in her back window that there was a gun in the room. I don't know if she had it in her hand or what.
Right.
Doesn't matter.
No.
Somebody was in her backyard, so if she grabbed a gun,
To defend herself.
that's legal. This is America. We have a Second Amendment for a frickin' reason.
Careful, Will.
But he yells, "Show me your hands!" And before he even gets "show me your hands" out of his mouth,
Bang.
he shoots and kills her right there in her living room playing video games with her nephew. And then there was two other instances that I'm not entirely certain of the details, but people have been shot from outside their home doing nothing illegal
Right.
because a cop got nervous. And no one cares because it's all about officer safety. That makes absolutely zero sense to me.
It's my understanding that officers are, or at least supposed to be, trained to assess situations and in many cases trained to de-escalate situations. Not to immediately go to, their handgun, their weapon. They're supposed to be, have the tools to, if anything, just to slow down just a little.
All the weapons in the world don't matter.
Mm-hmm.
Or all the tools in the world
Tools,
don't matter
yeah.
when your main tool and your best tool
Mhm.
is inadequate.
Right.
Do you know what tool I'm talking about, Kevin?
The brain?
Your brain. And the Supreme Court of the United States
Oh boy.
has upheld the ability for law enforcement agencies to discriminate against higher IQ applicants due to the fact that departments feel that higher IQ applicants will get bored with the job and they will have subsequently wasted money on the training that they provided these individuals. While I see the fiscal reasoning, I get it.
Right.
That's not exactly an area that I feel should be skimped on.
Right. We're gonna cut down on hiring the most qualified applicants because we're trying to get our money's worth.
Person who cuts my hair had to go to school longer
Right.
than your average police officer to be able to cut hair.
Right.
That makes no sense to me.
It's similar, like, to teach a college course. Most people, you have to go 6 years and get a master's. If you, like, for history, I'm essentially just telling stories. I have to go 6 years of my life to be able to do this.
Right.
But a guy can get 6 months of training and have the decision, make life or death choices with strangers.
With no accountability for the most part.
And that's the part that I think upsets most people. It certainly upsets me is they essentially get away with it. All the excuses in the world and all this and that. There's no one above them holding them accountable for their actions.
I mean, there's technically above them, but
not
not
in a meaningful way.
Right.
And that's what upsets a lot of people in a lot of communities is, someone's life has ended, and the person responsible got less than a slap on the wrist in most cases.
If you are entrusted with the lives in your community, you are entrusted with the power of the judicial system, of the legal system, of the executive branch, because it's the branch you're part of. You're entrusted with that much power. You should be held to that much more of a standard.
Right. Not so much that you're above the law, but the law itself applies to you even more, because not to sound like a parent, but you should have known better.
It's exactly what I was about to say. If you didn't say it, that's what I was going to say.
That whole thing of, this is your job, this is your profession. You should know what you can and can't do. And in other sentences, you should know you shouldn't do that. But like I said, it comes back to the lack of accountability. It's one of those things, I'm going to keep doing it until someone tells me I can't or someone stops me. And in a lot of cases, the cops are just, kind of running wild. They're not held to the standard they need to be, and they feel invincible, I think.
Speaking of invincibility, I know that the Supreme Court has actually ruled that police had no obligation whatsoever to protect you.
Mm-hmm.
There was actually a case of a man, I believe he was a Marine, retired Marine, on a subway, and he was attacked by a knife-wielding guy.
Oh, goodness. 2
cops were actually there, observed the fight, let the Marine fight with the guy, and disarm the guy before they stepped in to arrest the guy. So they went to court, and ultimately it was ruled that the police had no obligation to protect the man, only to enforce the law. So by letting him sit there and fight off the guy and then arresting him after, they were doing exactly what they were supposed to. They had no obligation to protect you. But then they will make you do for your safety. But then they will claim anything is for officer safety. What's the point?
Yeah, I'm not an expert, but I'm fairly certain gun beats knife, right? But if that's the case, then they need to go ahead and take their protecting serve off all their vehicles.
Oh, most of them have.
Oh, well.
I'm just waiting on them to be honest about it and put the saying on the side of the Transformers police car, to punish and enslave.
Oh, Lord.
There's been too many instances lately of we see cops take seemingly mundane, just average stops and escalating to the point of like beating people almost literally to within an inch of their life. In one instance I saw recently, it was over like a window tent ticket.
Yeah, that's another thing for officer safety.
What is the point of that? Like, one, they are to enforce the law. They are not the dispensers of punishment. That is for the judicial system to do. Your job is to hook them up, lock them up, and let them have their day in court, so that in the people's court, so that the people can determine their
guilt and their punishment.
Exactly.
Subsequently.
And I just don't get it. One interesting thing I found, I don't know if you've noticed or not, several police departments or police individuals or whatever have adopted the Punisher symbol, skull.
The skull.
But they'll put the blue line flag over it or something of that nature.
I have seen that floating around on social media.
The creator of the Punisher actually came out and said very negative things about that. Mainly because the character of the Punisher is the result of the decay of the American justice system and the police force.
Ineffectiveness of it all.
Right. So he takes the law into his own hands because of the corruption and the unaccountability. In a lot of instances in the comics, the police were the ones that were the bad guys.
I was thinking, like, the Punisher, he operates outside of the law for a reason.
Right.
Because the law doesn't get the job done.
Doesn't work.
Right. There's corruption top down,
So the fact that they would adopt that symbol says a lot about their mindset towards the American people.
I'm a bit overwhelmed with the irony, to be honest with you. This character was created because of the ineffectiveness of the group that adopted the symbol. It's just...
Right. It's very telling, in my opinion.
But it kind of goes like, I know I've had personal experience with police in my life where they have this mentality of they're legends in their own mind. They're like the old gunslingers of the Wild West. I'm coming in this town and I'm gonna clean it up. I'm the law, and this whole thing of
Or one fat kid in a cartoon originally made entirely of construction paper. You will respect my authority.
right.
Officer Cartman.
I've seen so many cops with the
With
with
aviator
aviator
glasses.
glasses. I can't help myself. I snicker every time,
Right.
and I guess it makes me look guilty because I'm laughing.
Like, regardless of whether I can tell you to do this or not, you will do it because I told you to do it. It's like you're only obligated to comply with lawful orders. A lawful order is an order founded in law. If there is no law allowing them to direct you in this fashion or denying you the action that you're trying to take,
Right.
then
don't
there is
have
no
to comply.
authority to
Right.
order you to do such a thing. So there's a big difference between an order and a lawful order.
And just some dude just trying to boss you around.
Exactly. And it's like they don't care. They don't see the difference. But mainly that's because us as the American people,
Become very apathetic towards it.
we allow it to happen.
We just comply.
We just do whatever we're told to do without question because of the potential backlash.
Right. And there's quite a
Which
bit
I
potential.
understand. I get it.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I've had instances of that myself. But we as Americans should be very, very thankful that the attitude that we have towards unwarranted authority or unchecked authority and sometimes abusive authority, we should be very thankful that the attitude that we have today is not the same one that was had in 1776.
Right. We very much have a long history of not liking being told what to do.
I saw a meme a while back. It's like, just comply with the redcoats. They're just doing their job.
I saw that one, yeah.
And that's very, very pointed and very real.
Very relevant to
Yeah.
today's attitude, as you said.
It's just do what you're told, regardless of the price you pay.
Right.
Because not everything is monetary. You lose a lot in just doing what you're told just because you're told to do it. You lose who you are as an American. I really feel.
Right. I mean, our whole country is founded on the premise of don't tread on me.
No step on snake is what it is now. Oh, and if you're going to step on snake, just, as long as it's reasonable. We are not anti-police.
Oh, absolutely not.
We're not anti-government. And correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin, but here at the Backwards History Podcast, we very much believe in what our government and what our country was supposed to be, not for what it's become. We have been abused by our government at all levels for a long time. We've kind of put ourselves in this situation because of how hard, quote unquote, it would be to stop it. It's more just like, oh, well, we'll deal with it.
Right. The whole grin and bear it mentality.
Right. That's not who we're supposed to be as Americans.
We got a long history of not being that way.
Right. We don't want you to take our opinions as your own just because we happen to have the gall to get on a mic and voice them.
Thank you, First Amendment.
Exactly. We want you to do your own research. Look some of this stuff up for yourself. Don't just take what you see on Fox News or CNN or because Billy Bob down the street and he's a cop and he seems like a nice guy. Look up some of the stuff we're talking about. Look up qualified immunity. Look up, some of these court cases, and you'll see how far we've gone down down this rabbit hole of losing our rights little by little.
Chipping away.
The Constitution, while we hold it up like a badge of honor in this country, we've surely let it die for the most part.
Just, kind of collecting dust in the corner somewhere.
But just like the tagline I'm about to put at the end of this podcast, don't just listen to everything you're told, whether the person has a badge and a gun or a fancy title or a podcast. Do your own research, form your own opinions, and as always, trust but verify.